Good morning, everyone, and welcome to your Wednesday energy forecast for today. So, for today, we have our energy mantra as well as our one card deck for today. And the one card deck that we're going to be using is the Mystical Wisdom deck. And so before we get started into all of that, remember that the most important thing for this moment, good morning, is all about really being as present as possible with yourself, with your thoughts, and all of that. That's what's really important because right now, astrologically, we're going through this Saturn Uranus. I can't remember if it's called a transit or a square, but either way, we're in the midst of this energy of triggers coming up, of things getting us, activated. And so we really have to be present. And instead of just giving in to those triggers, we must be willing to question them. And that's the most important thing that we can do is question those triggers to the best of our abilities. Good morning, Lisa. Morning, Michelle. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So for today, our energy mantra is I lean into my higher self. Morning, Helena. So again, the energy mantra for today is I lean in to my higher self. Morning, Shirley. So why are we leaning into our higher selves? Why is that the energy mantra for today? Because the more and more that we lean into our higher selves, the more and more that we lean into that higher power, the less and less we get, what's the word I'm looking for? The less and less reactive we get and the more and more responsive we become because we are responding from that higher aspect instead of coming in from that lower aspect. Exactly. Yes. Thank you for writing that down so everyone can see it. Wonderful. So now let's go to the Mystical Wisdom deck and let's kind of see what energy is going to assist us or what other guidance we have for today as we go through, these transit, as we go through just today, as we go through these moments. Ooh, okay, so our first card for today is Epiphany. Seek clarity. So once again, it goes so perfectly with what I just said about leaning into that higher self. Because once we lean into the higher self, you see that this woman, she's a bird. She's a bird person and she's surrounded by these birds. So she's elevating herself. She's seeing things from a higher perspective. A good majority of the time, we cannot solve problems from the consciousness in which the problems came from. We must be willing to look at the situation from a higher perspective. And that's where coming into that higher self really, really does, assist us in seeing that, in seeking that clarity. Oh, well, I'm so glad you were able to find me today. So that's our first card, is Epiphany, seeing things from a higher perspective, seeking that clarity. As we seek that clarity, we seek that knowledge. And we really begin to seek that inner knowledge, that inner knowingness. And as we do that, it's going to help us to really face our fears. Instead of letting our fears guide us or use us or move us, we're going to face them. We're going to look at them. And as we do that, we're not doing it from the space of that little self, that little I. We're doing it from that space of that big I am. I remember I heard someone say once, and I can't remember who, but it's a quote by Mary Baker Eddy, which says, I don't tell the divine about my big problems. I tell my problems about my big divine. So really just kind of switching it up. Instead of telling the divine, oh man, I have this huge problem. We get to tell our problems about our huge divine force that is there to support us and there to help us. But that's how we have to begin to think of it and have to begin to shift into that. So let's see what other messages we have. All right, so we get to, once again, we get to make the choice. And it says, make the best choice. And of course, the only way that we can really make the best choice is by tuning into that higher self, tuning into that divine force. And, we see this woman here, and, she has this beautiful crown on her head, once again, representing that higher self, representing that kingdom within our own minds. And then we also have, this moon over here representing to us, that release, letting it go and letting that choice come to you as we seek that clarity, as we seek that knowledge, as we face our fears. We get to choose what we're going to do. Either we're going to face the fear or we're going to let the fear continue to drive us, which then leads us to this card, which is the illusions. Let's embrace the truth. Let's stop embracing the illusion of fear and let's start embracing the truth of love. And we can do that. We have the ability to do that if and only if we are willing to acknowledge what is there. A good majority of the time, that's something that we have a hard time doing, is acknowledging. And that's really all that's asked of us, is to acknowledge what is there. Acknowledge there's a shadow. Okay, there's a shadow. I acknowledge the shadow. As you acknowledge the shadow, you bring it to the light. As you bring it to the light, it then disappears. But you have to acknowledge that there's a shadow there instead of being like, no, there's nothing there. No, there's nothing there. And just not looking at it, because that's not going to solve the problem. The problem is solved once you begin to look at it. So, like I said, our energy mantra for today is I lean into my higher self today. As we lean into our higher selves, the energies that we have working with us are seeking clarity, so seeking things from a higher perspective. As we seek from a higher perspective, we seek that inner knowledge. So we're going inwards, we're going into ourselves. As we go inwards, we're going to face our fears and release the power that fear has over us. As we release that power that fear has over us, we get to choose again. We have the ability to choose, okay, I'm going to let the fear control me, or I'm going to release that power. And then as we release that, we get an opportunity to really embrace the truth. Embrace the truth of who we are. Embrace the truth of the situation, which I like to see as this. The only power fear has is the power that you give it. That's the only power that fear will ever have, is the power, focus, and value that you give it. And what do I mean by value? When I say value, I'm not necessarily talking about, monetary. Oh, this is valuable this way or this is valuable that way. But let's take, for example, if I got this pin from, one of my spiritual mentors and teachers and guides, Sonia Choquette. Let's say she gave this to me, okay? So now I have now said that this pin, even though it looks like every other pin, every other black pin in the world, it is now more valuable to me. Because, not because it's, embossed with gold or anything, but because, Sonia gave it to me. So now it's the most special pin in all the world. And what would happen if I lost that pin? Does that mean that I lost the love? Does that mean that I lost the intention in which it was given? No, I lost an object. That's it. That's all that I lost. I didn't lose anything. And it's the same thing with fear. We oftentimes think that fear is this big force and that we need it. We don't need fear. We don't need it. There's no reason to have it. We think there are lots of reasons. We value those reasons. Oh, well, I need to be afraid because of this, and what if this happens, and what if that happens? And we think that's a way of protecting ourselves. But in fact, that's just a way of us stopping ourselves from progressing along. That's all that it is. It's nothing more than that. And the more and more we value those reasons for fear, the more and more less likely we are to move past them. Because we think they're these big, giant dragons that are sitting at the gate, breathing fire, making terrible noises. But then actually when you turn the corner and you get real close, you just see it's a tiny little gecko. That's all it ever was. It was never anything more than that. But it is about acknowledgement, and it is about release, and it is about seeing it from that higher perspective. Instead of subjectively, begin to look at today objectively. Begin to simply just kind of view the world. And you can always ask yourself, another great mantra for today, if your peace is disturbed, if your fear arises, however you want to look at it, is how would my higher self see this? Or how would love see this? How would my higher power see this? How would God see this? How would love see this? And in doing that, you're automatically tuning yourself into a different perspective. You're seeking that clarity. You're seeking that knowledge. You're saying, okay, how can I see this differently? And that's another way of leaning in to that higher self. So I thank you for joining me. I thank you for being here. And I will see you tomorrow again for our Thursday energy forecast.